Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running. Andy, it happened. I had like a good 50 episode run of doing it perfectly every time.
Well, it has been a good run,
Yes,
but
yeah,
I felt that it was going awry even
yeah,
before you tripped up. There's just something about the forced enthusiasm or something like that. So
yeah.
let's step back and you try again.
Okay,
Okay.
yeah, you cast a hex on me or something. Yeah. Hello and welcome to Roll for Topic, a roundtable discussion about topics related to running role playing games. I'm Chris Salzman.
And I'm Andy Rao.
There's the magic. Yeah. Ooh, okay.
Oh wait, we're back. We're back. All right.
All right. Sounds good. Cool. All right. So welcome to the podcast. So Andy, you told me before we got in the air that you had a question that you wanted to pose to me.
I do, and this shouldn't come as a big surprise. At the end
Yeah.
of the last episode, or sometime in the last episode, you hinted that you were cooking something up as far as your GM plans for 2023 go. And I said I
Yes.
would ask you about it. And so that is what is happening right now, Chris. So
You're gonna ask me
prepared or
about it.
not, I need to hear what your GMing goals are for the new year. We're
Yes.
well into February. We should have had this conversation a month and a half ago. But
Yeah, we're still in Q1 of the Roll for Topic financial calendar. So
that's right. That's right.
it's okay. My plan this year is this is something I think I've talked about on the podcast, and I've definitely talked with you about it a little bit. Is I want to run a game for some neighborhood people, some
Okay.
neighborhood adults, and the thought being that this would be other tired and weary parents who, after they get their kids down, they can kind of wander over and we can play for an hour or two,
Yeah.
some night. The thought being that everybody would sort of understand like the energy level, and then also just the scheduling should be a little bit easier because it'd be a bunch of people with younger kids. So I'd likely be pulling from like my kids' classmates' parents for this, right? So I'm pretty excited about it because I know that there's a handful of people that are aware that I do this podcast. I don't think they listen. If you do listen and you are tapped to playing this game, you have to tell me so I can temper what I say on the podcast. But so they're aware that I'm into these games and stuff, so that they've expressed interest, either polite or earnest, earnest
Yeah.
enough for me to ask them to come play. So that is the genesis of the idea. That's sort of what I want to do this year, is try to get something going, aim for a short-ish campaign rather than like just a one shot, to try to actually get into something and introduce a couple new people, or maybe pick up people who've played other games and try to run them through whatever it is I do at the table.
Yeah. Do you know their level of experience with RPGs?
Yeah, so there's two people in particular that I know I'm going to invite, and they have experience with like video games, right? Is most of
Mhm.
their stuff, and like maybe some D&D like way back in the past. So not people who are like currently playing 5th edition every week, in some sort
Yeah.
of some sort of long running group, anything like that. It would be people who are like more or less new, like they're not going to have like dice ready to go or characters ready to go. So we'd be starting from scratch, and to be honest, that's sort of the sort of people that I really enjoy playing with, because
Yeah.
they're not bringing in a lot of preconceived notions about what role playing is to the table. We can explore that and figure that out together. So I like that.
Yeah, that sounds excellent. And would you play like at your house or someone's house or at the local game store or what?
Oh, that's a good question. I guess I've just been assuming to be my place, right? The thought, like, because if it's a bunch of people in the neighborhood, it should be pretty easy to just kind of walk over. Yeah,
Yeah.
and we've got a pretty good space for it. Although, yeah, I don't know. I mean, we could. There's lots of options, at least for us. The place that we live too. So I mean, I could see it being a roving game too. It's like, yeah, one person hosts one week, the next person
Yeah.
hosts the next week, or something like that. What I'd be aiming for is almost the living room style of play. Have you done this before? Have you ever played a game?
Tell me a little bit more about what you mean.
I feel like I've never seen this in popular culture, but I've now played this way a couple times, where rather than sitting around like the kitchen table, you just sort of lounge in the living room,
Yeah.
right, and play that way, right? So you don't really even necessarily have like a table other than maybe the coffee table or something in between in between you, but it creates it. I mean, it's much more like you're hanging out, right, and just sort of like telling a story. Whereas I think sitting down at like a table together can feel a little bit formal sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When I was a kid, that's the way we played. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's how I learned to play, and that's to this day what I feel the most comfortable with doing. Because my friends would come over a couple times a week. We go in the basement and we'd sit on the floor,
Oh yeah,
or on the couches,
yeah.
and as I got older and started playing, with adults, sitting at a table felt really weird to me. I would say I still don't really love sitting at a table to play an RPG for whatever reason.
Interesting. Yeah.
When I'm GMing, I usually stand. And
Oh,
there's just something about sitting at a table just doesn't quite feel. I don't know. It's quite feel right. But,
yeah, that's interesting. Now I want to see a bunch of middle-aged middle-aged parents trying to sit down on the floor.
well, I
Yeah.
was going to make that exact joke
Yeah.
because as you age, it sitting Indian style on the floor becomes less. Takes you longer to get up, and it's
Uh-huh.
more you have to physically use your hands to move your legs into position and things like that. That
Yes, that would be,
was not the case when you were 13. So
yeah, there would be pregame yoga before before so we can all get in
right.
position.
Are you planning on a let's play D&D? Probably has the easiest pitch for
Mhm.
people that maybe aren't super gamers but have some kind of connection or maybe nostalgic memory of D&D. It
Yeah.
knowing you, that might also not be the most thing you're most enthused about. So
Mhm.
so tell me how you're picking a game and if you have one in mind.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head. I think so I was chatting with a few other people about this a week or two ago, and for various reasons, right? Like, just look at the news right now. Like, running fifth edition isn't super exciting, right? If
Sure.
you've been paying attention to all the nonsense stuff that's going on. However, people who haven't been paying attention, it's like it's still just D&D, right? Like, it's still fifth edition. Like,
Yep.
there's no, and then we've talked about too on the podcast, like, you can still play it and be mad mad about other stuff,
For
right?
sure.
Like,
Yeah.
yeah. So I'm for sure not going to go out and buy like whatever the latest adventure, the adventure is from Wizards of the Coast and try to put that on the table. But yeah, I mean, it's like it's tricky because like in my heart, it'd be fun to try Pathfinder, but also like if everybody just wants to play D&D, I mean, I could just tell them we're playing D&D and run Pathfinder rules or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, so I will probably end up running D&D, but the thought that I had was, and this is the hook that I think might keep my interest, is so there's a new like vintage nerd store, I'll call it, like out nearby me, called Weird Bird, and they carry like used tabletop games, right? So like
Ooh.
whenever someone wants to get rid of their tabletop collection, right, you can sell it off to these folks or whatever.
You're
And so
gonna have to start sending me regular photos of what they have in stock
I know,
because
right? Yeah,
there's nothing more fun than going through used games, I think.
I know, yeah. So they and I think we talked about this in the Discord. They had a copy of Traveler recently that they
Yeah.
had posted on their Instagram page, right? It's like, stuff like that where like, you're not going to go find a used copy of Traveler at Barnes and Nobles, right? Like, you're going to have to
Yeah. Yeah.
go to the weird niche like record and like kind of quasi head shop that also sells used tabletop games. But they posted recently, I think it was B4, it was like some old module from back in the AD&D days, and I just had this thought, like looking at it, like what if that's the way that I pick the game for what we're playing, is based on like doing the thing that you used to do, which is go to a store and just sort of like see what they had
Oh,
had there
yeah.
and grab it that way. It's like, kind of cut out the internet from from the thing that it does best, of going to eBay or
Yeah.
whatever to get the thing. But like, what if like that's the way that we picked up whatever we were playing next, is like, oh, like I wandered by the used game store and saw this cool new module, right? This new module, right? Saw this old module and I grabbed it, and then we just ran with that.
That sounds delightful.
That thought of like, okay, I'm going to wander into a store and kind of find the game that's presented to me based on like who found it in their basement to sell to sell to the
Yeah.
store, like has a certain amount of magic and mystery to it, that I think that like would be very personally satisfying, and I imagine I could make any of those games at least fun, any of those
Oh, yeah.
modules fun at the table. Like, there's probably some clunkers in there that I should avoid. Maybe
Yeah.
I'll do like a token bit of research just to make sure that I'm not getting getting like the worst module ever written. But
Well, that sounds like a delightful pitch to me. Getting
mhm,
an email with a photo of your tattered, Mountain Dew stained Traveler that you
yeah,
picked up saying, "Hey guys, I just picked this amazing game up at the store. Do you guys want to get together every week and play?" Like that
yeah.
that is the most appealing pitch I could possibly imagine for an
Yes.
RPG.
The thing that I don't know is if is that an appealing pitch to GMs, or is that an appealing pitch to someone that isn't like a regular regular player of these games?
I
Yeah.
would not confidently say it would be appealing to anyone other than me, but so, but your research sample size of one,
Yeah.
your co-host on an RPG GMing podcast. that says that it would definitely work on him. So
Yeah. Well, I
the
mean, that's good. Yeah.
the other thing I wanted to say is I have had perfectly fine success with saying we're going to play D&D, but we're going to use the Pathfinder rules, or we're
Hmm.
going to play D&D, but we're going to use this rules called Dungeon Crawl Classics to do it. No one cares.
Hmm.
It's great. It works fine. I have used that line many a time over the last 20 years of my life, and no one has ever complained.
Yeah.
Said that like, oh, you said this was D&D, but this is actually
Yeah.
Dungeon Crawl Classics. Like,
That's good to know, yeah, because that was one thing that has just been occurring to me. It's like, yeah, do I just tell them it's D&D, right? Because it's sort of like, it's the Kleenex problem, right? It's like,
yeah,
well, that's
yeah.
actually a Kroger brand tissue. It's like, well, no one cares, right? It's
They may be excited about the words D&D, but I promise you, your casual gamer neighbors do not actually want to play D&D.
Mhm,
To the extent that they want to come play with you, they want to have this kind of fun gamey experience that has maybe a little bit of nostalgia baked into it.
mhm.
They won't care. So
Yeah, those plans are starting to come together a little bit. Okay, well, let's see. We've been talking for like 20 minutes or so. Do you want to roll on the table and maybe have a short discussion about something, or should
yeah,
we?
listeners, we are going to roll on our table D10 table of topics to find out
Mhm.
what we're going to discuss.
Okay, all right. 8.
All right, that was kind of, I mean, no judgment. That was kind of a weak and subdued die roll noise.
Okay.
But I mean, I'll
No, no,
accept
no,
it
no,
if
no, no, no. Let me do it. So I have this very fancy, like, full desk mouse pad thing that, of course,
okay.
muffles everything, including cool dice sounds.
That's the
Okay.
problem. Yep.
All right. You
Okay.
ready?
Yeah. Oh, much better.
I'm gonna say 8.
8. Okay. 8. Chris, the topic we will apparently be discussing is how do you incorporate the families and loved ones of PCs into your games?
By imprisoning them and
Yeah,
putting
by
them in
killing them off,
peril.
obviously.
Yeah. Although, I mean, joking aside, that's putting them in somewhat perilous situations is sort of a good way to incite some action underneath the players.
It is certainly a tired trope in every genre of, in movies, books, etc. However, it is effective and it works,
Hmm.
to motivate PCs by having something bad happen to family or friends, right?
Yeah, I think there's an element of like you need the buy-in from the players on this too a little bit. Like there are particular loved ones in games that I played where if that person was killed off or otherwise harmed harmed in a way that like couldn't be fixed, like I would have been mad in real life about it.
Yeah.
Right. So there is that element to it too. So I think if you have some buy-in there, that's good. Let's maybe take a step back, I guess. Do you try to always make sure that your players do have those sorts of npcs in their game?
No, not
Mm,
really.
okay.
I like it when it happens, but the more D&D-ish the game is, the less likely that that sort of thing is going to have a presence in my games.
Hmm.
With games like Call of Cthulhu, like the game I'm running now, it somehow feels easier to incorporate, ties to family and community.
Hmm.
Maybe just because the setting is one that I can relate to personally more. So in my Call of Cthulhu game, this does matter that I'm running right now. This does matter, and there are some connections, and there are some NPC friends I am deliberately trying to establish some bonds with. I can't really remember the last time this really happened in like a D&D-ish type game that I ran though.
Yeah.
I don't know why exactly.
I mean, I think the rules don't usually in war game based fantasy games don't usually lend themselves well to like doing anything interesting with them mechanically.
Yeah,
Yeah, I think there's all sorts of ways you can make it pretty interesting mechanically if you just spent, a couple minutes thinking about it, right? Like even if
yeah,
that's as simple as like if you're in a town that's friendly to you, you get discounts at the store, right? Like so
yep.
there's some reasons there.
The premise of this D&D style fantasy that encompasses a lot more obviously than just D&D, it's kind of baked into the premise that almost by definition you are outside of the communities and the worlds and the quote civilizations that normal people live in, because you're
Hmm.
adventurers.
Yeah.
You're outsiders, right? And so it feels like baked into the whole thing is this bias against creating ties, back to real people.
Hmm.
And the way that D&D type adventures play out, I find it's hard to have a sense of like kind of a home base usually, or
Hmm.
like a hometown, because in most of your D&D type games, I mean, you're like across the continent exploring the desert or the forest or whatever, far from home. So, I mean, certainly you could run a D&D game that's like set in one location where your players develop ties to the people there and have family there.
Hmm.
But, how many modules do you buy where that's a real easy premise to slot into it, right? Usually
Yeah.
it's like, all right, you're at the top of the mountains of chaos,
Yeah. Yeah.
in one, in a Cthulhu game, the players have family, they have friends, and it's easy to imagine them writing letters or sending telegrams or phone calls or whatever it is to kind of maintain these relationships. But, how do you do that with D&D type fantasy? So,
Hmm.
I mean, this topic didn't say we had to talk about this only within the context of D&D fantasy,
Yeah.
obviously. So,
It's sort of the, I mean, like the trope of like everybody sort of being a loner who's, town burned down, like when they
yeah,
were little and they don't have any connection to anyone. It's like, yeah, but like most people in the real world, even if they've had almost everything taken from them in some way, like you end up finding a community somehow, right? Like, and novels are the same way, right? Like a novel that's it's just a loner going about their loner business, not making any connections to people, like that's not interesting either. I've had some success introducing like, hey, here's an NPC to care about. Like there's that trope of like, the random goblin you throw in the tavern being like the most interesting thing in the
yeah,
world,
for sure.
to the players, right? And I think it's because like people are somewhat sort of yearning for some of those connections within the game. But yeah, you're right on. It's like it's hard to like keep that moving forward throughout the game, right? Because if it's just like, well, this is a person that you're sending money back to here and
Yeah.
there.
It's one thing if your backstory is whatever, I'm the exiled son of the king. And
Hmm.
so that's an exciting family NPC relationship with the king and the queen and stuff that
Hmm.
might come into play. But, for most of us and presumably for most adventurers, the relationships that they really value would be kind of boring in the way
Hmm.
they are boringly central to our lives today.
Yeah.
What would it mean to incorporate, like, I have this brother that I'm really fond of who lives back in Waterdeep, 1,000 miles to the west of here. What would
Hmm.
that mean? How would that be brought into the game in a way that's interesting and not just like a sentence in your character's biography?
Yeah, I mean, I think it might give people like motivations, right? So if everybody in the party had some relatives somewhere else, right? Like then you have ways to, yeah, I think incorporate that just as they're traveling around. But I mean, you're right. Like as soon as they go to the mountains of chaos or the frost giants realm in the sky, or whatever it is, right? It's like, well, now you've removed sort of all those
Right,
potential
right.
bonds, unless they're along for the ride, right? So like one thought that I'm having is like, what if some of those like family relationships were within the party too? Like, I don't know
Hmm.
if I've ever played in a game where two of the players have been related.
Hmm.
Well, I mean, no, the players have been related. The characters have have been
Right,
related,
right.
right? Yeah. But in plenty of games where the players are related, that is kind of an interesting thought to me. Like, like what if your party itself was made up of characters who were all from the same family?
Yeah, there are some iterations of like fate, I think,
Hmm.
that as part of the character creation process, you're writing kind of descriptive facts about your character on your sheet, and you explicitly are instructed to hand your sheet to somebody else, and they write something about you on your
Oh, nice.
sheet.
Yeah.
Right, and you explicitly create at least one connection with at least one other PC. So whatever, I
Mhm.
save so and so's life here, or so and so is always nagging me to to do such and such. I can't really say that is something that I've done a lot of my games. It does
Mhm.
seem like it has a lot of potential to be cool.
Yeah, and like the fifth edition example, yeah, I mean, I think you do have to fight for it in a way that I think goes against the fiction a little bit because you become sort of like gods walking among men so quickly in that game
Yeah,
that it's like these petty concerns of your of family like are sort of beneath you because you are off trying to, yeah, kill, Tiamat or
yeah,
whoever it is, right? And that's like that is not conducive towards changing diapers or sitting down for a family meal, once a Sunday, right? Like those sorts of things that are a regular cadence in day to day life in the in the real world,
yeah.
right? And so like escapism is fine, right? But like I think there is something that maybe can be leaned on in these games that sounds like both you and I should probably do a little bit more of maybe to add some excitement to them. I mean, I'm glad that you brought up like Call of Cthulhu and like those style of, like those games. I mean, does Call of Cthulhu explicitly have like the like you have your symbol and do you have like a bond back to an NPC as well, or is this just in?
Call of Cthulhu has on the character sheet,
Yeah.
it suggests that you ought to do this, but it's
Okay.
not really mechanically integrated into the game.
Yeah.
So on the back of the character sheet, there's like a place I think to list your people that are important to you.
Hmm.
There are some iterations of Call of Cthulhu, like Delta Green, that make your loved ones resources upon which you can draw.
Yeah.
And like in Delta Green, it's a kind of grim, it's a deliberately grim setup where you can exhaust your relationships with NPCs to give you advantages to kind of reflect that you are whatever, you're skipping all of your kids' sporting events because you're out murdering cultists.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's part of that game's theme. So there are games that do that explicitly. But
Hmm.
I wanted to say, in reaction, I think you hit on something insightful there, that the kind of everyday relationships with our families and loved ones, it feels like kind of part of a more realistic world.
Hmm.
And there is that balance with D&D. If you start thinking too much about the like realistic day to day, where do they get their food,
Yes.
who's cleaning the diapers of the baby,
Yeah.
that sort of thing, the whole structure feels sometimes like it starts to teeter.
Hmm.
So unless that's explicitly, let's explore what, domestic everyday routine life would look like in the setting, if unless that is explicit your goal, that can kind of pull you away from maybe why you're playing D&D in the first place, which is
Hmm.
that, yeah, I mean, I don't change the diapers and I don't really worry about how this town up in the mountains of chaos possibly feeds itself because there's no trade roads or anything like that.
Yes. Yeah.
uh
Yeah, I wonder. I mean, like now, I'm just like now I want to run a game where there is some sort of external force, like the partner of one of the players, one of the characters is like, you need to be here for dinner. So
hmm,
you can go adventure all you want during the week, but like Sunday we sit down, like we go to we go to temple, and then we sit down for a meal. I mean, imagine the sort of pressure. It's like, yes, I want to save the world, but I also want to save my marriage. So like we need to we need to do
yeah,
both things. We need to be able to get back in time for that. I think that could add a lot of like fun tension to the game, and then also like stress relief too. Like what if you only awarded XP when you got to like sit down for the meal, something like
yeah.
that. You could add some sort of mechanical like reason for it too, right? Like yeah, or you only got like your next adventure every time that you stopped for a minute to go be with your family, your family back home.
Yeah, I really like that. I think the challenge would be avoiding it feeling like a not fun penalty for having fun with the
Hmm.
game, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So, like, it would have to be something where it would be equally enjoyable in a game sense to go back for your brother's wedding instead
Mhm.
of going into the Dungeons of Chaos,
Yeah.
or to choose to go into the Dungeons of Chaos, like where it would be the decision might be hard, but you would know that it was going to be fun, and you know what I mean.
Yeah. Yeah.
So otherwise, you wind up with something, like our much complained about, encumbrance systems,
Yeah.
which are there to kind of remind you about an element of the game that we all feel ought to be important,
Hmm.
but often isn't really implemented in a way that feels like it's a fun part of the game.
It's an emotional encumbrance system.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if you, when you identified your kind of NPCs or your bonds, or your loved ones, if you gave them goals or agendas of some sort, if you identified something that each of your siblings wanted, or each of your loved ones wanted or was trying to do, and then just the GM would, I don't know, advance the agenda every now and then in the way.
Yeah.
There's quite a few games that do this, but like the Blades in the Dark games have you
Hmm.
identify the factions in the world, and those factions kind of advance towards or away from their goals as
Hmm.
he goes on. And sometimes what the PCs do affects how those factions do or don't advance towards those goals. So
Hmm.
there's a lot of stuff missing there, but I wonder
Yeah.
if giving in some kind of active momentum to your relationships would make it easier to make them feel interesting in the game.
Yeah, I think you'd want to avoid it being like everybody in your family just has a fetch quest for you that you need to satisfy. Right?
Right.
Well, little Johnny's gonna be mad if I don't get them five, werewolf pelts or whatever. It's like,
That's
yeah,
right. Yeah.
those sorts of things. But I mean, I think there might also be something to that of like you have sort of this larger mission of yeah, like we must go fight fight God, but like we also need to like yeah be back for dinner or get something in particular or like this other relative of yours like really just wants to go into a dungeon at some point in their life, and like you're a level 10 whoever, right? Like you level
Yeah.
10 fighter, can you please just take them to the dungeon so they can shut up about it, like get it out of their system.
That
Like
is, you
yeah,
just made a one shot
yeah, right.
right there.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
little nephew Timmy like wants to come into the dungeon. So you've picked
yeah.
out one that you think is pretty safe and devoid of real danger, but of course it's not.
Yes, yeah, yeah. You swore you went in there and cleaned it out already, but for some
You
reason,
stocked it with a few giant rats,
yeah,
but after clearing out the lich and the vampire,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think there's definitely some fun you could have for it. It feels a little like side questy,
yeah, it
I
does. Yeah,
think, but that's okay. I mean, most of the time, those are the fun parts about games anyway.
it's like, so computer RPGs do this. Like the sort of the BioWare approach
Mhm,
is very much like this, and I can't say it always really works for me, but they
mhm,
do treat them explicitly as side quests. You can like charge through and do the main quest, but you're supposed to be talking to all your crew members, and they each have their own
mhm,
thing, that's, or in their own side quest, and you go on the side quest related to, crew member A, and you learn
mhm.
about their backstory and you get a little bonus or something, and then the
Yeah.
relationship meter goes from 8 to 10 or whatever. That's always felt pretty artificial to me, although I respect what they're trying to do, and I'm
Mhm.
maybe for some people that, and I mean, that
Yeah.
would probably be an improvement on a D&D game that never acknowledges that you have loved ones or,
I
or
know.
companions in your life.
Yeah, that's like it's like that's a complicated line to tread of like, yeah, do you treat all of your friendships like they are a series of inputs of correct and incorrect actions,
Right, yeah.
or
It does occur to me that, a flashback mechanic, a mechanic where you're encouraged to gain some insight or even a mechanical advantage by reflecting on an experience with a loved one or NPC might be a non over the top way to get you talking about it. Oh, this,
mm,
I'm going to get a +2 to climbing because when I was younger, my brother used to take me out to the hills behind town. And, a 30-second anecdote fleshes out a little bit your relationship, but lets you keep moving without doing a side quest for your brother who needs you to climb a mountain.
I think there's probably a lot you could do that way. I also just thought about like what if you really were given a list of like of groceries to pick up while you're out on your adventure, right? Or like things to pick up, like right, because it's like it's important, right? You're going to Waterdeep. We don't go to Waterdeep except for once every 2 years or something like that. Please make sure that you bring back this, that, or the other, right?
Yeah.
And you could even like that'd be a great prop to have at the table too, like write out the list of stuff, and then people can kind of collect things as they're going about their adventure.
Oh,
You know,
that does sound delightful.
yeah, for a
And
certain sort of player, they would
it's a
love
real
that.
thing too,
Yeah,
and you go to a town, and a non-zero part of your brain is circling around the problem of what am I going to get my kid,
yeah.
what souvenir am I going to bring back for my kids, and the excitement of finding just the right one.
Oh yeah. Years ago, my wife and I, well, we lived in Grand Rapids. We were, dating at the time, but coming out to Ann Arbor, where we live now, like they had a Trader Joe's, right? So like every time you'd come to Ann Arbor for some sort of other thing, you would go to Trader Joe's to stock up
Right.
on all the miscellaneous things that you just couldn't get in Grand Rapids at the time. I think things have improved for Grand Rapids,
Yes.
but
We have a Trader Joe's, so, but
yes, yeah.
yes.
But stuff like that, like that is a real world thing that I think you could bring in pretty easily. And like again, yeah, for the right player, they're going to grab onto that and be like, we need to make sure that we get everything on the list.
Yes, for sure.
Yeah, whereas everybody else will just ignore it. Yeah, so I mean, I think we sort of ended up talking about like errands most of the time, but
Yeah.
maybe that's where our headspace is at. But I think there's lots of ways to incorporate families and loved ones into your games, and I think the conclusion here is maybe like do try it. It's worthwhile.
Yeah.
Yeah, every time. Yeah, at least every time that I've tried to do it, it's like, oh, this is great. This adds like some sort of nuance to the players' understanding of their characters. Yeah.
I could close with a quick anecdote of
Hmm.
how this is going in my Call of Cthulhu game.
Yeah, please.
I guess very, very mild spoilers for the Cthulhu campaign, Masks of Nyarlathotep. So skip forward like 60 seconds if you
Yeah.
really don't want any spoilers. But that campaign kicks off with that stereotype scenario we discussed at the very beginning of this conversation. You are really good friends with this NPC, and they've been murdered. So you're trying to solve their murder and avenge them is going to form the basis for this campaign. That's great, but a regular critique of the campaign is this hook doesn't work if you're learning about your deep friendship with this NPC in the same paragraph that you're learning about their murder. So everyone online says, spend some time have them do some adventures, have the players do adventures with this NPC for a while, and then kill him and start the campaign. And so I've been doing that, and it's worked. And the players really like the NPC, and they don't want him to to die.
Oh
And
no.
so we're close to where I was planning to have him killed off screen to kick off the larger plot. And suddenly I mean, one of my players said to me that he better not get killed in a recent session. So now I guess I've gotten what I wished for, but it was sort of a monkey's paw thing, because
Yes.
now I'm thinking like, oh, is there a way I can like just horribly maim him or something, but he doesn't die? Like, like does that?
You're gonna have to give that NPC another NPC for to kill
Right.
off. Like, yeah.
But I will say, that took 7 game sessions to achieve. It's not practical for every NPC or loved one.
That's great.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, we've been going for a while, so we need to wrap up. So,
Yeah. Yeah, for sure.
all right.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, that was a fun conversation. I'm glad that we got to do that. In addition to talking about my GM woes at the beginning there. Yeah, so Roll for Topic is part of the Roll for It Media podcasting network. Our sister show, The Splat Book, with John Corey and Kyle Latino, is great, and you should go listen to it. They just had an episode posted about doing silly voices at the table that I'm just a little bit into, which I think is great. Like, that is it's a fascinating topic to think about, for me at least, about the times where I choose to do a voice and the times that I choose not to do a voice.
Yep.
And I've not narrowed that down personally inside of myself of like when when I choose to do those. Yeah, so that's good. I'm really looking forward to finishing that episode when I get a chance. Yeah, so you can go listen to them at thesplatbook.com whenever you want. You can find other episodes of this podcast at gmdiscussions.com as well. I don't think I've ever actually said that on the podcast, so the website, but there we go. Yeah, I think that is about it. So Andy, unless you have anything else, we can sign off.
I think we're good to go.
Cool. All right. Well, I've been Chris Salzman.
I've been Andy Rao.
Remember, if your player's having fun, you're a great GM.